Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. This is another episode of All Around Azure. My name is Jason Hand, and we're doing some things a little bit different today. Thought we'd mix things up. Hopefully, my audio is coming through. Hopefully, my video is coming through. I'm really excited for our guest today, a good friend who I've been hoping to do something with for a long time. Finally, our schedules worked out, and he's going to share with us quite a few things. We're going to be talking a little bit about static web apps, maybe some durable functions, all kinds of fun stuff that we have on the docket for today. But to discuss a little bit more of that, let's go ahead and introduce our guest. And so everybody please say hello to Anthony Chu. And I just realized, Anthony, your video on the stream here has, of course, made adjustments since I've tweaked it. So everybody say hello to Anthony. Anthony, say hello to everybody. How are you?
Hey everyone, I'm doing
Yeah.
well.
Now, while we're saying hello and sort of catching up here, I'm going to be tweaking some of our video here.
All right.
But hi, Anthony. How are you? What's going on in your neck of the woods?
Quite a few things actually. I'm a PM on both Azure Functions and Azure Static Web Apps. So there's quite a few things going on in both products. So for Azure Functions, I'm currently working on getting a few features that we currently have in preview to like a general availability status. So this includes a couple of things in durable functions. So durable functions now supports Python and PowerShell, and I'm trying to get those. I'm working with the team to get those to GA, and that's in addition to the existing languages right now, which are C# and JavaScript. Also working on a called custom handlers that allows you to pretty much write any Azure functions. Oh, sorry, write Azure functions in pretty much any language that you want. So right now, out of the box, we support I think 6 different languages. But with custom handlers, you can pretty much write any language and be able to build Azure functions with it. What else am I working on? So for static web apps, we previewed the product back in May at the Build conference.
That's right.
And then at Ignite, we have announced a bunch of stuff, including .NET and Python support, as well as Blazor support for the front end. A lot of folks were waiting for that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, once again, we're like for that particular product, we're just working hard to get that to be at a point where we can announce a general availability. Hopefully, early next year, we can do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's probably a few things that I probably forgot about, but we'll probably remember as we
Well,
as we chat some more.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things I wanted to talk about, last time we hung out was pre, COVID, of course, and then literally pre-COVID. I feel like it was that week or so right afterwards when suddenly we were traveling. We were on the Ignite tour in South Korea in Seoul, and then it was just like a few weeks later that all of a sudden all of the events started getting canceled. And
that was pretty wild. I remember actually being in Seoul, and I think I was visiting the Microsoft office or something. There was a big giant screen on the wall, and then the news was on, and then one of the people I was with was like, "Oh no, the virus is here," and I was like, "What virus are we talking about?" Actually, at that point I had known nothing about it, and then pretty much everything just snowballed from there. It was actually pretty interesting just thinking back that it was only 9 months ago that we were together hanging out in a different part of the world, and now we've been at home for the last 8 months.
I know it's been crazy, but it's also been, I think, encouraging to see a lot of folks be able to adjust and be agile so quickly, and new opportunities come up. I mean, we're able to do stuff like this and still stay in touch and work on projects together. So I'm thankful for some of the opportunities that have come from it, but I sure do miss traveling around and working on things in person with you. So anyway, it's good to have you here, and good to be able to hang out with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is pretty fun so far.
And yeah, like I mentioned in chat, I just put something in chat for everybody. We're trying out some new stuff, trying out a new camera, new setup, new audio, new all kinds of stuff. So I don't know. Maybe it wasn't too smart to make a whole bunch of changes before I pushed to production because now you don't know what's exactly working and what doesn't. Um, but for those of you on the stream, I know Frank's in there watching. The Let me know if anything's wrong. And I'm seeing the messages that the sound might be having a little bit of an echo, so I'm going to turn my system audio down just a little bit, and also that my mic might be a little low. So I'm going to be making some constant adjustments. So please let me know what you're hearing and seeing. So Anthony, the stuff that we were going to talk about, I think first, we had a lot of stuff out there as far as options that you suggested, and you mentioned a few of them at the beginning here. Static web apps is something I'm definitely looking forward to hearing whatever's new on that because I'm using static web apps almost on a daily, if not weekly, for sure. Cadence, and in fact, blog.allaroundazure is a static web app. So we're doing all kinds of stuff with that. I'm helping some other people actually kind of pivot their careers and become web developers, and they're doing some stuff with building Hugo websites and putting them up there. On Azure Static Web Apps. So yeah, I mean, does that sound like a good place to kind of start with some of the stuff you wanted to talk about today?
Yeah, for sure. How about we just start with like a maybe like an overview of what static web apps are, and then we can look at how we can deploy an app to static web apps. Does that sound like a pretty good plan?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Cool. Yeah. So static web apps is it's a fairly new product on Azure. It makes it really easy to deploy a static web app, I guess, for lack of a better way to say it, such as React, Vue, Angular. We mentioned Blazor earlier, as well as these static site generator created sites like Hugo and Gatsby. Um, Make that really these sites require a some sort of a back end, but you don't really want to kind of like create, like a build, like for instance, like a node, like an Express.js server, just to have it sitting around and waiting for a few requests that might come from the front end. So we allow you to create some backend APIs using Azure Functions, and then you can deploy those at the same time with your static assets, and we take care of deploying both of those for you at the same time. And I think I just lost you there for a bit, the sound.
That might have been on me, but we did kind of lose each other for a second. But yeah,
Okay.
thanks everybody in chat for helping me get through the all the audio stuff here. Um, Well, we had John Papa on the show not too long ago to talk about static web apps, and I don't know. I'm sure you haven't had a chance to see that episode, but maybe we can switch over to your desktop and you can kind of walk us through some of the new stuff that you were hoping to show off today. Does that sound good?
Sure. Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Let me switch over here to your desktop, and again, everybody in the audience, let us know if you hear anything. There might be some duplication on here too. So let's take a look at Anthony's screen here.
Yep, so I'm just going to open up the static web apps documentation. And of course, because I don't know what I'm searching for. There it is right there. All right. So to get started with static web apps, I think the best place to go, one of the best places to go is to kind of come to our docs. And I'll use this to kind of just talk about some of the features that we have. So kind of mentioned already that we provide, and I'm trying to zoom it here, but there it goes. For your static content, as well as an API powered by Azure Functions. Also talked a little bit about the GitHub integration that we have. So you can actually take your code from GitHub and get it deployed using GitHub Actions pretty much automatically as you kind of just create a static web app on Azure. We set up the workflow for you and we kick off that first deployment for you from your repo. So that's fairly seamless. Another thing that we do for you is we spread your content around the world so that it can be as close to your customers as possible so that anyone's hitting your site should get pretty good speeds. And then we also make available for you a way to kind of add any custom domain that you want. And then any custom domain that you want, we provide a free SSL certificate for you. So you don't have to worry about kind of going off and creating your own cert.
Right, and I think for me, like that was huge because I mean you have to have an HTTPS address anymore. A browser's just going to complain about it if you try to pull it up. So being able to do that and set up the custom domain, like to me, to be perfectly honest, I was using Netlify for a lot of my builds and pushing out static web app or at least static websites, Hugo sites. But with these new changes and especially how it handles the certificates, it was like an easy transition to move over to that.
Yeah, that's great. And we're still working on it. So for instance, right now, custom domains, a lot of people want to use Apex domains, which is basically the domain
Mm-hmm.
without the triple W. Currently there's you kind of have to do some workarounds to get that to work. But we're hoping to get some first class support for Apex domains, including giving you a free SSL cert for it, hopefully in the next few months. And then I can kind of quickly cover some of the other
Nice.
features that we have, and I can talk about some of the things that we're working on.
Yeah.
So we have an integrated authentication model. So you can pretty much just, without doing any work, you have access to social login with GitHub, Facebook, Twitter, Microsoft, and some other things. And you can actually specify and say that these routes on my static web apps. So this is actually like your static assets or your functions that you have. You can actually lock them down to specific roles of users. So if you, for example, only want authenticated users to be able to hit your functions or to access certain pages, you can just kind of define a JSON file and kind of just and we'll just kind of take care of all that for you. I talked a little bit about routing rules already, but you can also set up routing rules in terms of if you want to do any kind of URL rewrites. For example, it's a pretty common thing that you need to do for a static web app that because a lot of the routing happens on the client side, that if a client kind of renders your route as like a pretty deep route with a bunch of like slash user slash one, all that stuff, that only happens on the client side. So if
Mm-hmm.
somebody bookmarks that URL and then goes back to it later, the browser is actually going to go ask the server for it. And if your server is not configured to handle that, the server is going to be like, well, there's no file at this URL that you gave me, and that's because it's a client side URL. So what we provide for you to what we allow you to do is you can create this thing called a fallback route. So you can say that anything that that basically more or less generates a 404, like that doesn't exist. Don't return a 404, but actually return a the index.html, basically like the default page for your static web app. And um, what that will do is the static web app to load in the browser. And then when the static web app loads up, it's going to see the URL, and then it's going to go, oh yeah, that's a client-side URL. I know how to do this. And it's going to go and render the right page. So that's typically how you deal with client-side routing in a static web app, is that you kind of have to do a little bit of extra work. So we make that fairly easy for you to do.
Nice.
And then lastly, I guess the last kind of main feature that we have is the ability to kind of create staging environments.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have, if somebody submits a pull request to your site, we'll actually automatically create a staging environment for you so that you can actually see what the changes look like before you merge it into your main branch and have it go into production. So those are the main features. Yeah.
Awesome. And
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, as I'm making some more adjustments here, I wanted to welcome everybody. We've got a bunch of people that have just joined the stream. We've been rated by the Visual Studio channel on Twitch. So, hello, friends from Visual Studio, and welcome to the show. Welcome to our stream. This is All Around Azure. I'm Jason Hand. I've got my good friend Anthony Chu here, who's just kind of talking about static web apps right now. But welcome to the show. And if you have any questions, drop them into chat. Also, I would say just so we're making some changes to some of the setup here as far as I'm using OBS and a different microphone and all kinds of stuff. So got all kinds of changes in production here, and definitely let me know if you spot or hear anything a little weird. We'll try to make those adjustments on the fly. But anyway, I'll let you get back to it, Anthony. On that, just want to stop and say hello to everybody that just joined us in the chat there.
Yeah, I'm still a little bit new to this Twitch scene. So all this rating and stuff, that's all new to me. Uh, but yeah, so we just kind of went over some of the features for static web apps. So I can kind of talk about some of the things that we're working on currently. So I already mentioned that we're working on trying to add the ability to create domains at the apex, so that you don't have to use triple W in your URLs if you don't want to. Other things that we're working on are like I talked about how we're really well integrated with GitHub. But there's some people that just, like for some reason they don't want to use GitHub. For example, they're already in another kind of a code repository, such as, Azure DevOps. Using Azure repos. So they're like, well, how do we integrate with static web apps? How do we deploy apps to it?
Mm-hmm.
So we're actually working on sort of decoupling static web apps from GitHub so that we can enable some of these other experiences, whether it's deploying from your favorite CI/CD platform, or even doing the thing that we try to tell people not to do, which is right-click publish. But we want to make that easy as well if people do want to just take their app from their desktop and just push it up to the cloud as quickly as possible. So they'll all get kind of enabled once we decouple it, like static web apps from GitHub.
Awesome. Yeah, I love to see all the changes and enhancements coming down for this, because it has been a super useful tool for so many different reasons, and what it's been missing. Every time I go in there and I still see it says preview, I'm like, but it's so good. All these things that you're talking about are literally all the only complaints about what's not out there. The Apex domain, I think, is the big one. But honestly, I mean, I use Cloudflare anyway, and that's got a real simple workaround for doing that www kind of redirect thing. Yeah, so this is awesome stuff. And also thank you everybody in the chat for helping me kind of tweak some of this audio here. Friends says one of our chatters says that friends don't let friends right click publish.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't have a lot of friends, so maybe that's why I right click publish all the time.
I mean, you can do it in a lot of different ways too. Like in VS Code, there's a way to do static HTML, static web, not web apps, but static websites, I guess, by just doing a public right-click publish to storage. So, yeah, it's not a safe thing to do for something important, but I think right-click publish is always going to be a thing.
Yeah, like I think we acknowledge that there's like, different, like both skill levels, but as well as like different usages of like, especially things like static web apps where you can, have a full-blown production website running on it. But sometimes you are really just kind of hacking on something. You just want to quickly host it, so that you can show your friends,
exactly,
and things like that. So yeah, so we want to support a whole range of different ways of deploying.
Great. Have you got any like repos with anything in it that we can do a quick demo for anyone who hasn't seen how these things come together?
Yeah, you bet. So I have quite a few. So I'm like, let me find one that is sort of interesting. I have my caps lock on, and I'll bring that over here. So our good friend Aaron Powell, for our create front end as well as create serverless events, like these virtual events. What he did with a couple of folks on the cloud advocacy team as well, is that they built a digital workbook type thing for kids. So like, while the parents are like, attending a virtual conference, we can keep the kids kind of entertained, by letting them kind of draw on this virtual canvas thing. So I'll kind of show you like the deployed version of this. This is not Aaron's, but it's one that I put together. And then we can kind of walk through how we deploy this to static web apps. So I'm just have to go and dig that site up.
OBS is really challenging me today. Every time I think I'm safe, it makes some kind of random change to your video.
Oh, really? Like what's happening to me? Like, am I
You just
getting
become
flipped
it
upside
like it
down?
crops you off on the side. There's some kind of bound thing that
It
I don't.
crops me out. Like,
Yeah.
should I just?
Oh no,
I
you're
think it
fine.
might just be me moving. Are you sure it's not me moving?
No,
All right.
no, it's definitely
All right.
something
I'll
with.
try to hold still. I'll hold still. So like this is this is one of the things that we built. So you can actually just draw on it. I think there's you can choose a
Yeah.
color. It might be off screen right now. We can choose a color, right? There's a bug as well. Like when you resize, you lose the pen marks, but we'll worry about that later.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I did was I actually took that app and I added a little bit more to it because currently this is a completely client-side app.
Yeah.
And what I did is I added a server-side component to it, so you can draw with friends.
I love it.
So when you click this button, it actually goes and hopefully it works. If not, this will be a really short demo. Uh, and what it does is that it gives you like the special URL that you can go and share with some of your friends. So here I'll just be my own friend and open up another browser. And what's happening behind the scenes, and also have to wait for this to load, is when I draw on it, it's actually sending all the strokes that I'm drawing on the screen
Mm-hmm.
to an Azure function, and then that Azure function is actually relaying that to basically everyone who has this specific canvas open. So so I'm just imagining a bunch of kids
Right.
stuck at home drawing together while their parents are at a virtual conference. And this is like super easy to do with Azure Static Web Apps in combination with Azure Functions. So I'll kind of quickly show you like maybe a little bit of the code and then kind of talk about how we deploy this app. Does
Yeah.
that sound
That
good?
sounds perfect.
All right. So I think I have my changes on Aaron's repo here.
Yeah, and if you,
So the app itself is actually,
I was gonna say if you wouldn't mind maybe dropping that repo link into the chat between us, I'll share it with everybody else on the call here.
yes, let's do that. And my machine has slowed down
Of course. Of
substantially.
course.
So 1 second.
I told you we
Or maybe
wouldn't get
1
through
minute.
this without some kind of technical problems. I've already had a half dozen, so.
Alrighty. And I'm looking for the chat, which might be another
Lower left.
experience. There we go. All right. Sent that over.
There we go.
So yeah, so this is the repo itself. So what Aaron kind of built is basically just a bunch of static files. Like this is not even using Vue or React or Angular. This is literally just vanilla JavaScript with some HTML and JavaScript and some CSS. And all I did was I added this API folder, which is the Azure Function app. So so the main part is this draw function here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really literally just one line of code. I'm taking some lines that came in on the request, and I'm sending it out over a service that we have in Azure called Signal Service, which is a way for browsers or like mobile clients to connect to the cloud using WebSockets. And then what, in this case, a function app can do is it can just like using literally just one line of code, send messages to all the clients that are connected to my Signal service using WebSockets. So that's how the drawing is like the relaying of the drawing. It's actually being done super simple, like 12 lines of code.
Gotcha.
And that's kind of all I did. Like that was really the main function. I mean, another thing that we're doing is that we're actually saving each line that we're drawing into Cosmos DB. So I also have a function to retrieve the lines from Cosmos DB, as you can see, also a single line of code to retrieve basically all the different lines. So so what I believe will happen if I refresh this page, it actually pulls back the lines from Cosmos DB so that you can actually keep going. And anyone else that opens the session will also see the lines before as well. So yeah, so like it was literally those couple lines of code that did it. There's actually, I forgot to point out this line here, which is the line that saves the line to Cosmos DB. So this was in the earlier one where every time somebody draws a line on the canvas, we'll call this function,
Mm-hmm.
and then one line to save the Cosmos DB and those changes to everyone else's browsers. So then like the next thing that we need to do is deploy it. And to do that, you would just go to the Azure portal. And then my machine is super slow right now, so feel free to ask any questions you might have.
Yeah, we're always pushing people's laptops to the limit, it feels like, for some of these.
Yeah. So typically, yeah, to deploy a site like that, we would just need to go ahead and create a new static web app resource in Azure. So just search for static web apps.
And even though it's in preview, like is the anybody who has a Azure account can do what you're about to show, right? There's nothing in this preview version that's different.
That's correct. And in preview, currently everything is free. We're basically previewing a free tier, and we expect our intention is to keep the free tier around,
Nice.
And hopefully even enhance it. So like we will have kind of more of a paid offering as well going forward once we hit GA.
Mm-hmm.
But our intention currently is to make sure that people who are currently deploying the free apps can continue deploying free apps and maintain that free tier going forward.
Got it.
But yeah, so typically you would to deploy an app, use more or less just I'm just going to pick some random resource group, just give it a random name, maybe not with the space in it. Choose a region. And then the next thing it's going to ask me to do is to sign into GitHub. And, well, this is new. I'll just continue. Oh, no. All right, one moment.
Yeah, and I also noticed recently, because way back when this first came out during build, I was doing a bunch of stuff with it, and I don't know how many websites I had going, but I hit a limit. There's like a upper bounds limit on how many you can make. I want to say it was like 10 or something around there as far as how many static web apps you can have.
Yeah.
And so I ran into that limitation, but that seems like it's been lifted, or maybe it's just something within our team that it's been lifted. But the other thing too, I noticed.
Yeah, I need to check on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, who really needs that many? I mean, just for playing around, I didn't need that many, but on a free account. But the other thing I noticed too is that you can't deploy, or at least within my own account, I can't deploy from the same branch to multiple Azure Static Web Apps. Is that by design?
So I have news for you. So 2 days ago, we lifted that limitation. So you can now deploy, like this is what, yeah, like a lot of people have like what's called a monorepo. So they basically have multiple apps in there that you might want to deploy. So in the past, what the problem was that you can only have one GitHub workflow that we kind of acknowledged within a single branch. So if you wanted to deploy to two different static web apps within a single branch, we didn't let you do that. But as of a couple days ago, we shipped an update that allows you to now to more or less deploy more than one static web apps from a repo.
Oh, okay. Well, it's not just the repo.
Try that out.
Wasn't it branch specific? Because I had gone through and
within
changed.
The branch as well, yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I had gone through and changed like, and I didn't even think about it, but like went through and changed all my branches from master to main, and then of course that breaks the YAML, breaks the workflow file. So I had to then go back and like change everything to main. Anyway, and that's when I realized, oh, well, now that I've got one over here that's pointing at master, I can actually spin up another one and have it point at main, and then just change all my DNS and stuff on the back. And that ended up being what I was doing, or what I did, because of just the way I had it set up. But that's nice that we can actually kind of deploy based on branches now.
Yeah, and before I think the way that the web app was set up, it was kind of bound to the branch that you're deploying from. So like that scenario about
Right.
renaming your branch from master to main, it actually wasn't quite easy before. Like you kind of
Yeah.
had almost have to create a new static web app to do that.
Hmm.
I believe that's currently now unblocked as well. So
Okay.
like I think we rolled out a fix for that.
Cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's been
that
super fun working with this team
I was gonna say that was like the most
because we
recent
roll
thing
out
that I
things
looked
really
at.
fast.
Yeah, I would say that I've been super impressed with how quickly. I mean, just like you're saying, like I'm in here all the time looking at these things, and now you're telling me like there's been changes even since the last time I looked at it. Um, but yeah, I love that we can now kind of point to different branches and have my like development branch, have like the production branch. Feel like a real programmer.
Well, you are, Jason. You are. So anyway, I've kind of selected my the branch that I want to deploy from, and then now we also have this new kind of drop down type thing of you can select some presets.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not super intelligent right now, but we do have plans to actually inspect the repo so that we can actually try our best to figure out what's in it and kind of recommend the right presets. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll kind of show you what one of these presets might look like. So if you chose like React, for example, it just kind of pre-populates where typically a React app would be, which is, for instance, like a lot of people would have it built to a build folder. So that's your app artifact location. But if you were to kind of change to say view, for example, that becomes dist, right? So we hope for this to improve some more as we go forward. But currently, at least we'll kind of give you a little bit of a head start anyway by selecting
Mm-hmm.
some presets that we have kind of built for you. So and then obviously you can make changes if your repository have code and in other places. And then once you're ready, just go ahead and click review and create. And I won't do that today, but you just click create. And then what it does is that it goes into your GitHub repo. And I'll kind of show you errands here. And it actually goes ahead and creates a GitHub workflow that contains a lot of stuff, but the main part is this one here, the build and deploy step. Is using our static web apps deploy action, and it takes in the locations that you passed in earlier that you kind of provided in the portal. We're just scaffolding out this file for you and basically committing it to your branch in GitHub.
Mm-hmm.
And then what that does is that it also simultaneously kicks off or causes a GitHub action to kick off. So you can see that there's a bunch of things that I've run in this repo, and it's just a standard GitHub action. I don't know if I have access to look at Aaron's actions, but it looks like I can. So you can see that it just kind of like goes and figures out what to do, and then it deploys it in about 30 seconds. And then once that happens, you can go to your site and your app is up. In this case, this is a function app. So, or like it includes a function app. So sometimes you might want to configure your function app using, environment variables and things like that. You can do this in the portal by just clicking on configuration.
So so
In this particular app, yeah,
I got a question. So
yeah.
in my situation, I was just explaining where I went and changed all my repos names, or at least which one was my default repo, changed it to main. My instinct was to come in here and be able to modify what you see on the overview about which branch it's going to point to. And you're saying currently there's no good way to change that. Is that something that we think down the road that would be something you could edit from within here instead of just redeploying a new one?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So right
nice.
now, the way to do that, to change your branch, is to hop into your workflow file. And this didn't even work like a week ago. So we just published the fix for this,
Cool.
which is you can actually go in here and say that I want to trigger off of a different branch. So if you rename it to main, just kind of say that I'm going to trigger off
Uh
main.
huh.
And the problem before was that this action, when it talks to the static web app in Azure, it actually like the static web apps in Azure is actually also tied to, in this case, the master branch.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't possible to just more or less change this file and have it work. We needed to do some work in the service to allow you to change branches. So step one right now is you can do this by modifying this to just by renaming the branch.
Hmm.
But I think the only thing that you'll notice here somewhere,
So you're saying that that would
I actually don't even know where it shows.
right here in
Yeah.
this screen, it would update to reflect that change you made to the workflow file, the YAML file?
So what I'm saying is that so when you modify this workflow, it will work and it will actually start deploying from your main branch, for example.
Right. Okay.
What won't work right now is that currently this is actually the name of the branch. We haven't fixed this so that it actually points to the new
I
branch,
see.
but this is just a cosmetic thing.
Got it. Okay.
Behind the scenes, it'll still deploy
I see.
from the new branch that
Okay.
you kind of pointed to. It'll just be a little confusing for a while until we kind of get this change out.
Okay, that makes sense. And we got a question in chat too about the functions, the Azure functions that are kind of related to all of this, right? In terms of
Yeah.
what settings are available to you for the functions part of this. Like I see functions over in the settings, but how
Mhm.
much can you really monkey around with all the function stuff?
Yeah, yeah, I guess yeah, that's one of the main sources of confusion, I would say, for folks, especially folks that have worked with Azure Functions before. There are some differences between what we allow. Just think about these function apps is that we manage these function apps for you, so you don't actually see the resource on your account.
Mm-hmm.
So there's pros and cons. So it makes it really easy for beginners to get started. It's, you can deploy your function app at the same time as you deploy your static web app. But the other problem with that is that you don't actually see the function app resource. So there are things like the main one is that we don't currently expose a way for you to set up the Azure storage connection string
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of the different triggers that we have in functions rely on. And we're still kind of discussing about whether we want to kind of expose that because our intention is for these APIs to be an API. So the only triggers that we really, want to support are HTTP APIs. And right now that works just fine.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some scenarios where, for instance, if you want to do a timer, for example, we actually require you to have a storage account linked to your function app, but currently we don't allow you to link any storage accounts to it. So timer scenarios, for example, don't work. Plus,
Interesting.
really,
Okay.
any of the other triggers don't currently work. And we're kind of thinking through about different ways that we can potentially light this up in a way that makes sense, so that beginners, when they come to this, or basically people that only work with HTTP functions, can still come to this and have a nice managed experience. But if you need to kind of break the glass and actually work with the function wrap resource itself, we want
Mm-hmm.
to provide you a good way of doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's probably a little bit further out, but we want to make that possible.
Okay. Yeah, there's always that trade-off of how much we abstract away so you don't have to worry about it versus how much do you want to be able to get in there and massage things. There's another question in chat. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
this is totally related to this, maybe more just functions, but the question is, I've been using the .NET 5 RC, which I'm not real sure what RC stands for, but if you want to help us out in chat on
Release
that.
candidate.
Oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And keep getting the CORS errors, the CORS errors, trying to call in trying to call an in-service function. Is this a known thing? And if so, is there a fix? Do you know anything about that, Anthony?
I think I might need a little bit more details. So like, is this .NET 5? Is it a Blazor app that's running in a browser, or is this somewhere else? Like, I'm trying to figure out where the .NET 5 is. We don't
Okay.
currently support .NET 5 in Azure Functions itself.
Uh-huh.
So I don't think we're talking about functions. So I'm kind of guessing that it might be as like a Blazor app running as a static web app calling into a function. And if that's the case, I can sort of quickly kind of
Sure. Okay. Well,
see if there's a
MCM,
way to resolve.
if you want to give us a few more details, let us know. Okay.
Yeah. But one of the things that we hopefully can remove from your kind of like your day-to-day burden of like of being a web developer is dealing with cores through the web apps, the static web apps product. And we do that by basically serving both your backend, your AP, basically your Azure Functions API, as well as your front end, your Vue, React, or Angular, or some other app,
Mm-hmm.
through the same domain. So when that happens, and the calls, which means that when you're making a call from the browser to your function app endpoint, because they're now on the same domain, you don't have to deal with cores anymore. Um, so as long as you're calling the same function app, you shouldn't have that problem. If you do, we'd love to kind of hear more about it. I'll actually throw up another link here. If this is related to static web apps, I'm going to github.com/Azure/static web apps issues. We're kind of gathering both feedback as well as helping people troubleshoot things.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a good place to just to check out to see what we have coming up. Like we share a lot of roadmap stuff in here as well.
Yeah.
I'll paste this link into the chat.
Yeah. I'll share that with everybody.
Cool. So yeah, the person who asked the question, if you have more information, feel free to file an issue here or reach out to me. Happy to kind of help you figure that out. So the only reason that I could see kind of cores kind of playing into this configuration is if you have your app hosted in static web apps, but your function app actually hosted somewhere else. In that case, you do have to go into your function app and enable cores. But that's typically like it's some work, but you don't have to, it's not super difficult to do it. And if they respond with, like that is the problem, I can actually walk you through the UI to do it. Yeah. So like let Jason know.
Yeah.
If
hit us up. We've got our
that is the problem.
you should be able to see our Twitter handles there, so feel free to reach out to either one of us on that. We can follow up with you.
Awesome. So we talked a little bit about how we can deploy things. What else do we have here? So yeah, there's actually not a ton of stuff to kind of walk through. Okay. It is fairly simplified right now. If you submit a PR, a pull request to the repo, it is going to create a new environment for you. So currently I only have one environment and I haven't deployed this for a while. But you can, or like it will create additional environments for you. I believe currently we're capped at a very low number. It might actually be one currently. But we're going forward, we plan to open that up quite a bit, so that especially in the paid tier, right. But even in the free one, we'll give you quite a few environments, so that it can actually be useful for you to preview any pull requests that you might have.
Excellent. That should be really, really handy, really nice. People split those out. Well, is there anything else on the static web app side of that's kind of new, people might not have heard about?
Let's see. Yeah, so I kind of talked about, I think most of the things that are kind of newish are some of the things that are upcoming, and I think I mentioned most of them.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the things they're working on currently are a lot more behind the scenes, making sure that the service itself can scale out as we onboard more and more users, and we're onboarding quite a few users per week. So it's really great to see, but at the same time, we're just kind of doing the back end work to make sure, so we can kind of scale with the demand, as well as things that potentially things that a customer that's using like a paid tier might want to use, like maybe things to do with security, for example, where you want to kind of have an enterprise grade solution. So we're working on things like that. So you should expect small changes here and there, kind of some of the stuff we kind of mentioned in terms of supporting different CI/CD providers and things like that. But a lot of the things that we're going to be doing in the next few months are a little bit more behind the scenes as well.
Okay, cool. Well, I should also say in our chat, some feedback from Frank. He's very excited about this information you just shared. He's going to be able to finish one of his apps that he's been working on. So I guess stay tuned on that. looking forward to see how that works out. Well, I'm going to bring us back to a side by side here, and we'll start talking about another topic that we kind of had on our list of things to hit today. Is something that you are involved with quite a bit lately is durable functions. You want to give us an update on what exactly is happening in the durable functions world?
Yeah, maybe we should just spend a couple of minutes just talking about what durable functions are to catch everybody up, and
Totally.
then yeah, I can definitely kind of provide some new things that we're working on for durable functions as well. So durable functions is a way to orchestrate Azure functions into like serverless workflow type scenarios. So for like serverless functions like Azure functions, there are some limitations. So even though they're really useful for running stuff in really massive scale, as well as you can have consumption-based pricing for what you use. Those are all really great things, really good properties of serverless functions.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the things that we've observed over the years is that quite often you might bump into things like, oh, like I want to run something for longer than the 5 or 10 minutes that my function platform provides for me.
Right.
And I'm not really able to do that really easily. Or I want to kind of coordinate a bunch of functions to do things all in parallel. But then when they're done, I want to basically do a fan out and fan everything back in to do a summarization. It's really, it's fairly easy to do a fan out in a serverless function. You just drop a bunch of stuff onto a queue, and then that causes a bunch of functions to run.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's actually, not a super easy problem to solve on like how do you know when all these things are done so that you can do a fan in. So durable functions allow you to orchestrate functions that way. And there's also some other patterns that we support as well that I can kind of quickly walk through
Okay.
if that's kind of sort of
I
interesting.
mean, it seems to me like, we first start hearing about serverless and what we've got going on with functions and all the use cases, and it's meant for just like short, business logic code, just like execute on something, and you don't need an entire server living, for who knows how long to run these things. But then we come across some use case scenarios where we actually need something to run a little bit longer, or we need to store something in memory, something in storage, and like remember and recall something. And then suddenly that kind of like breaks the paradigm of serverless. It's like we have to pivot back to what we know about traditional, development and architecture. And so to me, that's kind of the how I would describe durable functions. It's like we've met in sort of the middle. We swung all the way over to serverless and realized there's a lot of good cases where this is going to help us, but there's also these like edge cases, maybe not edge cases, but you do need to be able to remember some things for certain applications to operate. And then there's all these other things too. So anyway, that's the way I always think about durable functions is when you need to recall something again. That's going to be, durable functions. You got to start looking into that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, because we like for the longest time we've been saying, hey, like build your serverless functions, make sure they're stateless, make sure they're stateless. But sometimes like you say, like we do need a little bit of state.
Mm-hmm.
So I think durable functions strikes that good balance where conceptually you can have these workflows that you can build that are stateful and can run for, minutes, it could be hours, it could be like days or weeks. And actually like if one of the ones that I can show you is like you can actually have a workflow that runs forever. So if like the example that I have is you want to actually monitor like a certain location for changes to files. So you basically have this workflow that's more or less just runs in a loop and just checks every few minutes. You can do like exponential backoff and stuff like that if you needed to.
Okay.
Um, but but you need to run that for a long time, right? And you don't want to just spin up a server just to do that. And the way that durable functions works is that you can do things like invoke another function. So like that this function can actually go and check for new files.
Right.
But as the orchestrator function that you write invokes that other function, it actually goes to sleep. So you're not paying for the execution of this thing that conceptually runs for forever. You're only paying for milliseconds at a time when it needs to wake up and figure out what to do next. So in this particular case, it's like you would just basically have an orchestrator function that goes and calls another function that will just run for a couple of seconds to check if there's anything new. It reports back. And then if there's nothing to do, then it can say, hey, I want to sleep for 10 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever it is, whatever your backup algorithm is. And that sleep also costs you nothing because the orchestrator function goes to sleep. And then when it needs to wake up, it'll fire again, figures out what to do next. In this case, it just needs to call that same function again to check to see if there's anything new. And then you can kind of picture this going over and over again, but then you're not really paying anything because every time that orchestrator function runs for milliseconds, you're technically being charged for it, but because we give you 1 million executions for free, right. Typically you're still within that threshold. And this is like 1 million executions for free per month as well.
Especially, so many of the projects we work on, the more proof of concept, and minimum viable product ideas where we're getting in there and seeing what Azure functions can do, then figure out where durable functions kind of fills in the gap. 1 million is a lot. Like, I don't know. Are you gonna ever use that many?
We have customers that use a lot more than that. They have very high scale applications on Azure. In a sense, we do depend on people using more than 1 million. Well, otherwise, we don't make any money. Yeah. But for the majority of people, you can get by staying well below the 1 million executions per month.
Yeah. Well, is there something that you can show us off if we switch back over to your screen?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Let's get back to that.
Well, let me know when my screen.
You're there, and your camera didn't move. Nothing changed. Hallelujah.
Oh, really? Okay. I moved though, so I don't know where.
No, you're perfect. You're right in the middle.
So I'm here. Yeah, so I'm here on docs again. These are the durable functions docs. I go to this all the time because we just have so much things. There's so many things that you can do with durable functions. In that, like, I'm finding new stuff in here all the time as well. But the main one that you probably want to read up on if you haven't done anything with durable functions is the overview page. Here we kind of talk about the different languages that we support. So I talked about C# and JavaScript are the ones that we support in production right now. And very soon we're going to GA the Python support for durable functions. And then hopefully very soon after that, PowerShell will follow as well. Those two are currently in preview.
Nice.
Yeah, and then we support quite a few different application patterns. We're gonna spend maybe 3 or 4 minutes just to kind of quickly go over them, and then I'll show you a couple of examples of how those might work.
Excellent.
Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds perfect. I'm getting the
okay, awesome.
link ready to share with everybody here for our durable functions overview.
Oh, cool. Okay, did you find it? Do you need the link?
Nope, I found it. We're good.
Okay, cool. So the first one is probably I wouldn't say the simplest one, but the one that a lot of people think about in terms of longer running workflows is like doing function chaining. So quite often we have customers coming to us and they're saying, hey, I have this really long ETL extract, transform, and load process. So a process that takes some data, maybe once a night or once a month, then does some stuff with it, maybe aggregates from other data sources as well, and then puts it through a bunch of transformations, and then makes it saves it in a different form so that it can be consumed, either putting it into a database or as files, whatever it is, or report, for example. And quite often these things run for quite a while. It could be, it could be 10 minutes, it could be an hour. With Azure Functions, in the consumption plan, you can actually have functions that run for up to 10 minutes. And then we have some other plans, like the premium plan, where you can actually run your functions for 60 minutes or maybe even longer. Wow. But the problem is that even if you had a function that can run for, say an hour, what happens if your job, it's running all the way to minute 58 and then it crashes? Then you kind of have to start over again. You lose everything. But if you're able to kind of decompose your workflow into many much smaller parts, like for instance this very generic example here on the screen, what you can do is not only can you now execute these hopefully in a few seconds, maybe a couple of minutes, so that you can stay well within the limits of a serverless platform itself, as well as like the different transitions as you kind of like take the result of function one and pass it to function two. For instance, you can kind of think about like I've seen folks who want to like create a database, seed it, run some tests, and then tear everything back down. You can actually kind of use durable functions to do that. Wow. Yeah, but after each function runs, we actually save the return value, the state, for you. So for instance, if you've kind of already done some work here, and then this particular function has a problem, and then it crashes because like something downstream is not available. It needs to run again. It needs to wait or whatever. We actually have mechanisms both for retries as well as just kind of checkpointing at every step so that you don't actually lose your progress and have to start over at the very beginning. So this is a very common use case for it. I'll kind of quickly show you some code. Like this is really the orchestrator function itself. It's some really simple JavaScript or Python or whatever it is that you happen to be writing your code in. We're literally just calling the function, just give it a name. And then we use this yield syntax, and the yield, as well as await in C# is kind of where we do some of the magic in terms of checkpointing your state and all that stuff. But the code that you're writing is very, it's just like any other code that you write. And you can even see that we have like a try catch statement here. So if something goes wrong, like you can definitely do like a giant try catch statement, but you can actually have try catch statements around each one of these things. Or loops or whatever you want. You can actually just write any kind of code that you want, almost any kind of code that you want in an orchestrator function. And we take care of all that checkpointing and putting, kind of pausing your function, all that kind of logic behind the scenes for you.
Nice.
Yeah, and then another pattern that we see a lot actually is this concept of fan out, fan in. Mm-hmm. So you can actually, you know what? Like this is probably a good time to do a demo because I think I actually have a demo of something like this.
Cool.
So let me go find my VS Code. All right, I'll quickly show you this one here. And just one sec. All right. So where did it go? It's right here. Make this app go really big. So this is a fan out, fan in of a Python durable function app. And there's some lag here on my computer. But this is the orchestrator function itself. There's not a lot going on here. But this is actually doing some real work. So what work this is doing is I'm calling another function to say, hey, give me a bunch of images to classify using a machine learning model. In this case, this particular function returns a bunch of URLs to functions, to images of cats and dogs. And the idea is that we're going to go and now take those and fan them out to multiple functions that can run at the same time across many, many machines in the cloud. So that's what this particular call is doing here. We're saying for every image ID, I'm going to call an activity function and pass it the ID. And then I'm going to collect up basically pointers to all these things I started and then say, hey, please wait for them to finish. So this is the fan in part. So you can see that we're kind of one line to do a fan out and pretty much one line to do a fan in. And then behind kind of like the serverless nature of Azure Functions to kind of to actually fan out and do this work. So I'm going to go and find my browser. And hopefully my demo works. So a lot of the stuff that I'm showing you today are stuff that I literally have been just working on that haven't quite finished, but they mostly work. So so I have this one deployed. And so that's just more or less running this code here. So So when I click that button, it called an HTTP function, and an HTTP function just started up an orchestrator for my particular run. And what it's doing is that it's taking an image count of 100 and it's getting 100 images back. And then if I go back here, it might take a little while for the first time. As is behind the scenes, it's queuing up a bunch of things onto queues. But hopefully, you'll see that so it's running through this TensorFlow model in my Python code.
Okay.
That, to be quite honest with you, I just copy and pasted off the internet. I don't know how to write machine learning code, but but somebody else knew, and then I just took their code. So you can see that as and it's already done. But as we allocated more and more resources for you in the cloud, it's able to go faster and faster. And if I were to kind of run this even longer, it will scale even more. So this is a way of kind of doing like a fan out, fan in type thing with durable functions.
Wow.
You can see that it's mostly accurate. I didn't do anything to train this model. It was actually no, I did. I used custom vision.
Oh yeah.
The Azure Cognitive Services custom vision product to basically create the model and then export it from there. And I'm actually loading it in my app, which lives
The
right
custom
here. This
vision
PB
tool
thing.
is so cool. I actually had a guest on last week who had done some stuff with custom vision, and every time I see it, it's just so impressive. Even beyond the cat and dog identification.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, hopefully no one's really doing a lot of that, like cat and dog identification, because hopefully that's a solved problem by now. But it's a fun one to do.
Yeah. Hey, we've got
as an example.
we've got we've got a
Oh,
question.
go ahead.
Yeah, no, we've got a question
Yeah.
in chat regarding some of the stuff you're talking about with custom vision. One of our guests says that we would be Azure Function Aggregator pattern be a good fit for the following use case. I need to run custom vision on images sequential to track an object in space, but I need to keep the last position of the object. Right now I have a console app that keeps the state in memory, and I'm thinking to use Azure Functions, but I'm not 100% sure if my use case is good for the aggregator pattern. Thoughts?
I think it could be. So the aggregator pattern is actually one of the last ones that we have. In other worlds, so we call them stateful entities, but in other worlds, people call them actors. So this is a whole different kind of programming model that we probably don't have a ton of time to kind of cover today. But in a sense, we're giving you stateful actors in durable functions, which can be quite useful. A lot of people use these for IoT and things like that. But one of the things that are a little bit different, at least currently the way that we implement it right now, is that we optimize for durability. So we make sure that your stuff gets saved and persisted, which means that I wouldn't say that well, I guess we slightly deprioritize performance or latency. So depending on the type of performance and latency that you need, it might not be great for right now. We are working on, currently this is backed by Azure Storage. So like when you use any of these patterns in durable functions, behind the scenes it's actually using Azure Storage. But we're actually working on different backends that could be a lot faster, that can potentially give you the throughput that you need to do something like keeping track of stuff in real time. But we're currently, because we're sending stuff through queues and stuff, if you're watching us in real time, it's actually taking a few hundred milliseconds for functions to get invoked, simply because we're doing stuff through queues. But there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that don't quite lend themselves super well to real time right now.
Gotcha. Okay.
So hopefully that answers your
Yeah.
question. You can try it out, but it might, but we don't necessarily prioritize or like make sure that it's fast. We're like our goal right now is to make sure that everything's correct and saved properly.
Yeah. Sounds good. And thank you for the question, Rick. Appreciate it. Hopefully that helps you out.
Cool.
All right.
And then I'll just quickly go over a couple more examples,
Yeah.
and then yeah.
Sounds good. We've got about 20,
So another
20
one that I've
minutes or
been kind of
so
working
before we'll
on.
start wrapping things up.
Okay, perfect. So here's another thing that I've been hacking on. This is really fresh. Like I started this 2 weeks ago. But I wanted to see whether or not, and these are like, like if I open one of these things, you can sort of recognize, these are just JavaScript tests. And I wanted to see whether or not I can use fan out, fan in to run my tests in JavaScript. So I'm just going to pull up something right now. Actually, no, I'll walk you through a little bit more code.
Okay.
Yeah, so these are just, this could be something that you pulled out of, Mocha or Jest or some other kind of JavaScript testing framework. This is some JavaScript testing code. It also happens to use behind the scenes this tool called Puppeteer, which is a way to drive headless Chrome, Chrome headlessly. So like, for instance, if you wanted to run some tests against your website every hour, or just run a bunch of tests against your website to make sure that, oh, hey, my e-commerce site's checkout still works. You would use something like Puppeteer and something like Jest or Mocha or something like that to basically drive those tests. So I wanted to see whether or not I can build a test framework out of durable functions that can basically take these tests and just like parallelize them out across different machines in the cloud, so that I can run them really fast. So let me fire up the browser. So the UI itself that I have is it still runs locally, but it's actually talking to stuff in the cloud. So hopefully this works. I actually don't know if it does because it's so fresh. But behind the scenes, I just kicked off a bunch of durable functions. Like basically, I just started this app. So when it starts up, it's going to go through this folder that I have and figure out all these tests. And then it's actually going to take them and fan them out to different machines, basically. And the orchestrator that does that is it's called Test Orchestrator. I should have known that. So this is the orchestrator. Again, very simple. This is the fan out right here. I'm rushing because I need to get back to my browser because it's probably running. So in real time, it's actually running these tests. And I think it's already. I can go ahead and kick it off. In real time, these things actually pop up on the screen, and you can see that this thing is passed, and it actually takes a screenshot at the end as well.
Wow.
So I'm able to take, in this case, I think a few hundred tests, and just fan them out across different machines and have them run and have them show up. So if I scroll up to the top, you can see it's like they're still kind of popping in as I start another run.
Wow.
So yeah, so it's pretty cool.
That's real cool.
So that's something that I've always wanted to try out, and I was actually quite surprised that it works. So kind of brings together a few things that we've been kind of working on recently, both in kind of like, making sure that JavaScript durable functions works really well as we made it possible to run headless Chrome in Azure Functions. So both of those kind of mashed together kind of gave me this pretty interesting test framework. This particular repo is not like I haven't pushed it yet, but I don't know what's the best way to kind of get this out to you all if anyone's interested. Maybe follow me on Twitter. Maybe
follow Anthony on Twitter.
It's an easy way to plug my Twitter account.
And I'll also say, we've got blog.allaroundazure is where we keep every episode, kind of our archive, and we put everything up on YouTube as well. So once you have it someplace where it's ready to share, you've got a public URL for it, we can make sure it gets out there.
Cool.
We got a quick question
and then the very last one that I want to show you.
Go ahead. No, you're good. We'll just go back to side by side here, and then we're going to touch on some Learn stuff. But there's a question of can I use the headless Chrome to save a web page as a PDF?
Yeah, you can. I actually have. Well, I'll just plug my own blog post. How about that? In this case, I am using Razor. So I'm using a C# function. Actually, it's the first one. But you can do this with JavaScript as well. So Puppeteer has a basically like a dot, like you can go like basically page dot save as PDF method. You literally just call that and it just works. So here I kind of show you how to create PDF invoices for our favorite e-tailer, Tailwind traders, um, using an Azure function. But in this case, I'm using C Sharp, but you can just as easily use Puppeteer on JavaScript, for example, or even Python to do it.
Nice.
So hopefully that
Yeah,
answers
it
the
sounds like
question.
that answers the question. Then they're going to be able to convert a virtual machine to a function. Got a lot of stuff out that they don't need. So awesome. Thank you.
Cool.
Okay. What other questions do we have before we
Yeah,
switch?
and I just have,
Oh, go ahead.
okay, no, go for it. What other questions do
Well,
you
I was
have?
just going to say, well, there's no other questions just yet, but if anybody has any questions, feel free to drop those into chat. I was just looking at the list of the different topics that we wanted to cover because I'm kind of keeping an eye on the time here. We've got, it's about 10 after, so we got a little less,
Okay.
a little more than like 10, 15 minutes or so. I know we talked about going into some code space, looking at functions within code spaces. Is that something you think we got time for, or is there
Ooh.
something? What are you thinking with the little time we got left?
Um, that would take a few minutes, but yeah, like I'm happy to do that. If that's the like if that's interesting to
Well,
everybody. So that's another thing that I've been kind of experimenting with is how do we get people to easily get in how to get people easily into an environment where they can run Azure functions without installing a bunch of
mm-hmm.
stuff. And I was thinking using Codespaces for it.
Yeah, I've been scheming different ways to integrate code spaces into my like projects that are going on. In fact, Frank, who's hanging out in chat also, and he just shared the URL to our blog. Thank you for that, Frank. But he and I were chatting earlier in the week about some new stuff that we're gonna be working on, and how code spaces might be. This might be a perfect opportunity to actually start playing around with code spaces and working together on some code. I think is obviously the best use case for that. But I'm stoked to finally have something to actually do it with.
Cool.
Let me switch back to
Yeah,
your.
so I'll quickly spend maybe like 2 minutes and tell you
Yeah.
about how Codespaces can be used for something like Azure Functions. And this is kind of like something I've been experimenting with is like currently to kind of get going on Azure Functions locally on a machine, you have to go and download VS Code. You have to install the Azure Functions extension, install the Azure Functions core tools, and make sure that, like you have the right version of Java or
Yep.
Python or whatever you want to use to build your Azure Functions. It could take a little bit of time, right? So I was thinking like, well, what if we just provided an easy way to create a um, to get
Mm-hmm.
started. So I kind of created a template repo here with a dev container, and this is what kind of creates the environment for Codespaces. So here I'm just using a Docker image for Azure Functions core tools with Python 3.8. So all that stuff's already pre-installed. And I'm also saying, hey, make sure that I have the Python extension installed as well as the Azure Functions extension installed. So now when somebody goes to my repo and they click on uses template, and I think I've already done this somewhere else.
I'm gonna put that.
And if not, we can do
I'm
it
put that
here.
template into the chat.
They
For
can actually go
everybody.
ahead and say open in Codespaces.
There we go.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
And then they can basically say open this in Codespaces. And then, so what GitHub does is that it goes and reads that dev container definition, that Docker file, so understands which Docker image to pull down to start my environment in, as well as it reads that JSON file that I have that describes what extensions I need pre-installed and all that. So basically, when somebody clicks the button, you kind of just get into an environment that's already pre-configured to do the thing that I want them to do.
Yep.
In this case, this is working with Azure Functions. So hopefully this
And the
loads up.
interface is
And that'll
like
kind of,
Visual Studio Code. I mean, it's a pretty familiar interface.
yeah. There's actually a button, or if not a button, you can actually, there's a command that actually allows you to open in VS Code. So you can
What?
actually have VS Code connected to a code space.
I didn't
Yeah,
know that.
I think it's here. I'm not pre-announcing anything, am I?
uh,
Yeah, so like
you didn't sign an NDA, did you?
so if you kind of hop over here, maybe, yeah, well, I gotta make sure everyone else watching has signed the
It's the
NDA as
benefits
well.
of
But I think you can just right click. Look at this, open in VS Code.
wow.
So I can just take this,
Because I like the way
and
I've
I
got
haven't
my
done this
VS Code
recently,
all
so
set
let's see
up,
what
right? I've
happens.
got my theme, I got my colors, got all the extensions I need.
Yep. And you can to your Codespaces
Mm-hmm.
config as well.
That's true.
But sometimes, there's no substitute for using your own favorite editor. And while this thing loads up, another thing I want to kind of show you is that there's now this little plus button here. So you can actually click this button, and it actually installs this code space as a what's called a PWA, a progressive web app. So it actually looks and acts like an app running on your computer.
Hmm.
And here I am. I'm actually in here. I've already so I can actually go ahead and F5 in my app. If anyone can see the bottom left corner, you can actually see that it's I'm connected to my code
Yeah, you
space.
might.
And then when I hit F5 to run the app,
It's a little blocked on our end. You might have to drag that bottom of your code window up.
all right. Oh no, I just opened Teams.
Uh-oh. Say
All
goodbye.
right, I'm dragging it
Say
up.
goodbye.
Let me
Say
know if
goodbye.
this is.
There you go. That's good right there. I think. Yeah. Yep.
All right, I'm gonna try to press F5 again. Like this literally was something I was working on Friday night, so I'm not sure if this is actually gonna work. But you can see here that I already have the Azure extension already pre-installed.
Yeah.
I have this thing called Code Tour that actually walks me that's able to walk you through. It's running very slowly right now for me. Don't know if it's going to start up. Um, but I'll also show you this thing called Code Tour as well really quickly
Okay.
that I've set up. So hopefully either the debugging will start or the code tour will start, and then we'll just kind of end there.
Or your
Okay,
computer
this
will
is not
just
going to
die.
happen. But let's see it.
Computer will just give up.
It's feels like it's melting. Let me check my activity monitor. Yeah, my CPU is pegged right now. Um, oh, but look, yeah, so like
You
you
can see
can,
some stuff happening.
so I'll kind of walk you
Yeah,
through
there
this
we go.
code tour. So imagine you can have an empty repository that's configured to run whatever kind of app or framework that you have. But also when someone opens it, you actually get invited to this tour. So you can actually, and I clicked on it actually, but it's actually not going anywhere because my computer is going a little bonkers. But you can actually go and click through this wizard thing that walks you through how to create your first function. So, right, that's just using a bunch of Markdown, and yeah, it's a really neat way to actually teach people how to get started on
Excellent.
something. Um, and you can even do things like, well, hey, go ahead and like run this command thing, but you can actually click on it, and actually going to goes ahead and actually runs the command for you. So so you can actually like use this as a tool to teach people how to get started on something. And I haven't actually finished, writing out this thing yet. But then at the end of it, you should have a function app that you can run, that you can press F5 on, although it's not working for me right now. And yeah, and you can kind of test locally, and especially since you're just working in VS Code locally, it actually feels like an entirely local experience.
Is this a new?
So you can have VS Code in the browser using Codespaces.
Huh. Well, I feel like this is kind of adjacent to. Do you ever do anything in Logic apps? You know how. So I think it was it Build or no? I think it was Ignite. But recently there's been some changes with Logic apps, and first of all, there's a great extension for Logic apps now as just part of like the Azure extensions, where you can see like the code, of course, of your Logic app, but you can also there's a designer, like an editor mode, and I don't know. This just feels very similar to they made it so you can create a Logic app and actually run it locally, run it on-prem, run it on your own machine, and everything, which I don't know, I never even thought about with Logic app, but now it's like this is the same thing. I mean, you're just able to take that code that you're going to run in the cloud eventually, but we'll just get it all set up locally first.
Yeah, And fun fact, Logic Apps V2, the one that you're talking about, actually runs on top of the functions runtime. So
Oh,
that it actually leverages a lot of the tools that we have
okay.
locally to actually spin up that Logic app and run it locally.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're actually like we're collaborating with that team quite a bit, both in bringing Logic Apps to functions, but also like, taking some of the connectors in Logic Apps, and actually allowing us to just use it from a function app.
Oh,
So
huh.
so instead of like figuring out how to call a Twitter API, you can literally just, with a single line of code in a Logic app SDK, or this thing called API connector SDK, which uses Logic apps, the connectors behind the scenes, you can use it to talk to Twitter.
Nice.
So it's currently in private
Wow.
preview right
I can't.
now, but it's pretty cool that we're like the two teams are
Totally.
collaborating.
Yeah, I can't wait to play with that because I've actually got a project I'm working on right now where a Logic app is kicking off a function to just do a push some files around. So it's already playing well together. I can't wait to see where it goes from here.
Hmm.
Sweet. Well, let's see.
But yeah, but that's all my machine will allow me to
I
show
was going to
you.
say I don't know if your machine's going to cooperate much more. Let's go back to a side by side here and let me look through some of the other stuff that we're probably not going to have time for because we got just about 10 minutes left, but maybe we can just chat about some of these things. We thought about maybe also doing some stuff around custom handlers and doing some code in Go. You want to talk about some of the things you've been working on with that?
Yeah, so I mentioned when we first started, I guess, an hour and a half ago. Yeah, so like one of the things I've been working on is a feature called custom handlers that allows you to run pretty much any language that you want in Azure Functions. So Go and Rust are probably two that the people have been asking for a
Yeah.
lot. So hopefully that feature will allow those folks to be at least a little bit happy. Like, I mean, like it's still not full, 100% like a first class language, I would say. But it allows you to kind of compile your Go or Rust app
Mm-hmm.
and run it with Azure Functions, and you have full access to all the triggers and bindings,
Hmm.
as you normally would with other
That's
languages.
great. I occasionally watch. Oh, now your video changed unexpectedly again. I occasionally
Oh,
uh, will watch Eric St. Martin over on his Twitch channel. He's working on some Go and some Rust stuff lately. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny that Go's been around like 9, 10 years or something, and how popular it's become recently. I feel like a lot of the projects people are working on just within the advocacy team, Rust and Go are like two terms I hear all the time. So it's nice we're starting to be able to support those. Oh, and then your video just changed back. Must be something to do with the Skype NDI.
hmm. I was actually alt tabbing between Skype and
Is that what did
and
it?
my other browsers. Maybe that's doing it. I don't know. I won't touch anything anymore.
Don't touch it. Don't touch it. Yeah, and then I think the last thing we talked about after the custom handlers thing was we were going to maybe do a demo of I think what you were talking about with connecting how easy it is now to connect to Twitter's API just with a couple lines of code. So
Yeah.
have you done some projects with
But yeah,
like
like we already talked about that.
have you done some interesting things where you can
I
automate?
haven't.
Because I know the Twitter terms of service obviously you can't automate too much, but I'm sure a lot of the things that we do feel like automation, but not necessarily.
Yeah, you can do some things like, periodically pull down some tweets and do things with it. You can post tweets and things like that. But it still doesn't change too much about what you're able to do.
Yeah,
It just makes it a little bit easier for you to do all that without writing the code.
right. Excellent. Well, we got about 5 minutes left. I wanted to kind of show off just real quick. I know you're not going to be able to see my screen, or I guess we could try. How's your laptop feeling over
Mhm.
there? Do you need to take the temperature of it and see if it's going to survive? The,
It's fine. Do you want to go to learn?
yeah, I was going to say I found this really interesting Learn module. Let me put it into our chat real quick for you, and
Okay.
we can pull it up on your end and take a look at it. It's one on running durable functions.
Hmm.
So let me know when you see that.
Yeah.
And And yeah, let's just go back over to here. And in fact, I've got a nice little thing I want to switch to here. So let's go take a look at our Learn module. Oops. And yeah, so we got this create long running serverless workflow with durable functions. I'm actually showing it off from my machine for everybody in the audience, but I wanted to make sure, Anthony, you could see the same one. Yeah, just had it easier to see that way. But it goes over what is a durable function, of course, a lot of the stuff that you were talking about already, and the different function types, a lot of the same diagrams even that we were looking at over in the overview. And then, you know, for anybody who's never been through a Learn module, there's always going to be some sort of knowledge check to just make sure, you know, you're not just skipping through everything, but you're actually retaining some of the information in here. And then I believe if I go back one more, we've even got some exercises in here too, which I'm guessing in most cases, yeah, they'll have you go into the Azure portal, and then in some of the exercises where you're going to be using some code that'll actually spin up a sandbox for you. So anyway, there is some decent stuff in Learn related specifically to durable functions and a lot of the functions in general. So if you just go to Learn and then search for it, now I'll put this one in the chat so everybody can go check it out too. But yeah, I just wanted to point that out. I think a lot of these Learn modules are pretty, they're getting so good with some of the stuff that's in here now. Like I'm trying to set aside almost daily, definitely weekly, some time to come in and learn some of these, just because there's so much good stuff. Have you been doing too much with Learn modules? What's your score? Keeping your XP score in check?
I'm just looking at this one right now. For some reason, I did one of the exercises, it says, but I don't have a good score. I'm at, it says 1500. Does that mean anything? I'm a level 2.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Level 2.
I don't know what this means.
It means you're 7 levels below me. We need.
That sounds about right.
Well, let's see. What do we got going on in chat over here? Let's see if we got any more questions before we wrap things up. If I can get into the right browser. Frank thinks I'm just showing off here. I've showed the if you notice, for those of you on the stream, I know, Anthony, you can't see this, but when I transitioned over to the Learn module, Frank made us this really nice like animation that goes through with the luggage that you find on the like Learn page. If you scroll all the way down, there's this little image of like a suitcase. So anyway, we're experimenting with all kinds of fun stuff over here. Well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions in chat, so. Anthony, I appreciate you jumping in. I know this was a little bit short notice, and you have had a busy day and have a busy week and just have a busy everything. So it's always nice to hang out with you and catch up. I miss traveling around, eating chicken, like hot chicken in Seoul with you. It was like one of my last and favorite memories of traveling around and just I miss it. But this is nice to be able to hang out here and interact and learn some stuff. I mean, I learned so many new things just chatting with you. So we're going to try. I've never tried this before, but we're going to try to raid another channel. We're going to try to head over to the Visual Studio stream, I think. And yeah, so anyway, thanks everybody who's been following along in the chat, who's been watching us. This is my good friend Anthony, and thank you, Anthony, for joining us on this episode of All Around Azure. Go follow him on Twitter. Pay attention to what's going on in his GitHub repo. I'm sure there's always some interesting little projects he's got going on over there. And Anthony, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. I appreciate everybody hanging out with us, and we're going to see if we can raid another channel real quick. And yeah, we'll see you next week. Take care. Bye, Anthony.
Thanks for having me.